Welcome. And my guest today is Richard. Richard, tell us a little bit about who you are, what your role is, and what your business is all about.
Thank you. My name is Richard Hall. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called PDM. And PDM is a innovation, design and sustainability consultancy based just north of York and in Leeds.
Excellent. So let's dissect that a little bit. Just tell us in a little bit more detail what PDM does.
Good question. When I talk about innovation, people ask me the next question is, what actually do you do? So we are a product design, probably the best way to describe it is we are a product design agency. That's fundamentally what we do. We design and create products. But the real key to this is the innovation aspect, which is anybody can innovate, but you need to understand what you want to innovate. So a lot of this is strategic. So it's about insight, the narrative, where the market is, understanding the user. So a lot of what we do is medical devices and life sciences. So we can design a medical device or something that you see in a lab. That's probably the best way to describe it.
So if I come to you with a medical device and I say, I've got this nice little innovation here, what would you do with my comment? Where would you take it?
The first thing we'd try and do is kill it.
Right, excellent.
So
back to the drawing board.
Back to the drawing board. So no, we would positively challenge you in terms of the rationale behind it, because innovation is a very specific science and kind of an art, really. So we would interrogate you in a nice way in terms of what was your train of thought? Where's the inventive step? Have you spoken to the intended user? What size is the market? As you would know, what's the intellectual property portfolio? Do you have a freedom to operate? I think in the prescriptive innovation, i.e. the act of innovating, is what comes after the kind of early stage interrogation part. So we would actually look to kill the idea. So when clients come into our studio, we, in a very nice way, look for points of weakness. So if we can find those points of weakness, we can fix them. So in our design studio in Thirsk, you'll see a Sinclair C5, which some of the viewers may or may not know, but it's...
You better tell some what that is. I do remember, sadly.
So Sir Clive Sinclair is a chap who made his money in computing in the early 80s, and he turned his hand to a one-person mobile transportation unit. So if you imagine a velocycle, so you sit on your bottom and you put your arms underneath your knees, where the steering wheel is, or the steering kind of handlebars are. His concept was that everybody would be whizzing around town in a one-person transportation vehicle.
I'd call it a go-kart.
If you imagine a go-kart, yes, it's similar to a go-kart. But if you look at that as an innovation in its own right, it was the first kind of velocycle. It had a battery, so it was kind of assisted power. The external was designed by Lotus in terms of the aerodynamics, and it had advanced composites. So in its own right, it is, I believe, truly innovative. However, Sir Clive Sinclair didn't really think about the user, early enough, which is what we spoke about a moment ago. Have you interrogated your user? So it's a true innovation in its own right, but when you align that with the market, there was no need for it.
Interesting. In what way had he not thought of his consumer?
The idea that you would sit with your bottom 10 inches from the ground, very highly exposed, going down Fulford in York, for example, with an articulated lorry whizzing past you. It's something that the users just didn't feel comfortable about. And I think the bias that Sir Clive Sinclair had was that because he'd turned his hand to computing and made a lot of money, that he would use the same skills, the same assets to transfer to another theme, for example, one-person transportation vehicle. But the real flaw was he didn't talk to the user. He didn't carry out early-stage prototyping. He didn't focus on users enough. He didn't get the user experience. And that's kind of how it failed. So it's now an icon of design, but for the wrong reasons. And I think in innovation terms, you might have heard things like user-centered design, UX, UI, which is something that's always been around, but in the design innovation community, it's now a lot more understood. And if you're a startup company going for funding, say from Innovate UK or the research arm of the NHS, one of those fundamental questions will be, have you spoken to the user and can you demonstrate evidence that your user will use this product or that there is a market need for it.
And so you help bridge that divide between the idea and it, for example, getting funding or becoming commercialized.
Yes.
You help them get that market research and prove the idea or disprove the idea.
Yeah.
As the case may be.
In terms of, yes, correct. In terms of market research, we're not classic market research, but it's more to do with curating the right user. So, for example, if we're working on a medical device, we did one recently, a cardiac project where we curated a team of heart surgeons and we hosted key opinion leader meetings where we had a conversation with them, because innovation starts with a conversation, talking to them about their current operating procedures, where the issues are with current devices that they use, where there might be opportunities for innovation, why there might be opportunities for innovation, and how we could almost create a design brief for something new and refreshing. And you'd be surprised how many innovators don't reach out to their target users early enough, because, as I said earlier with Sir Clive Sinclair, there's a bias there because you've invented it or innovated it that they will be users, and that's true in some respects. But if you want to make a really commercially viable product, you really need to think a lot deeper and broader in terms of that target market.
Yeah. So you were saying, I think, a little earlier that in fact people are getting wiser to this now, that presumably this has become part of the education, if you like, and the training that those coming out of university, other tech environments are getting for their innovations, for their products. But still there is the concept, I would imagine, of having a great idea and wanting to get that to market, almost come what may. And I suppose in many ways you are sometimes the deliverer of bad news, aren't you?
Yes,
as well as in the sense that you have to disappoint to be to be true to the service that you offer at times.
Yeah, 100%. I think for us, it's our reputation is paramount. So we've been around since 2005. So blood, sweat and tears from founding a business. So I know exactly how hard it is. But we have a duty to our clients, or even our prospective clients, to tell them what the process actually is. So we've seen lots of innovations out there that are, that have got potential, but not the kind of killer final thing that makes it to market. So yes, I'm the guy that will hold clients back. Yeah. So, and I talk a lot. I mean, we've spoken about the Sir Clive Sinclair. Another one is the Gartner Hype Cycle. So Gartner is a US company, and if you Google Hype Cycle, it will show several different aspects of innovation, which is the trigger. The first one is there a need for the product, a true need for the product? And then as you track it, it goes through the peak of inflated expectations, where the graph rapidly inclines and everybody gets really excited because they think they've got something new. And then what tends to happen on the Gartner Hype Cycle is that it falls into the valley of death. And this is where there are issues with IP, which I'm sure that you've seen before, in terms of they've not got an FTO or not a big enough market. There's technology obsolescence, so the product will be obsoleted in a matter of years. Yeah. Usability, competitor market. So there are lots of reasons why an innovation could fail, and it's my job as the CEO to work with clients to share that journey, but more importantly to navigate through that, to find a way around it. Mm-hmm. So in the terms of technology obsolescence, it's being aware when we innovate that when we launch a product, for example, an MVP, minimally viable product, that on the back of that, within a period of time, there will be the next generation of that product. And you see it a lot with, things like Apple. Apple needs to continually innovate, and it's having that awareness of where the market is. And the strategy around it is the most important thing.
You mentioned an interesting point about the MVP there. We didn't start with the current Apple iPhone, what are we, 16 now? They started with Apple with the iPhone 1. And I think there is a lesson in that, isn't there? That you're not, although if you're a scientist, you probably want the best you can get out there. there is a sense in which you want to get, as it says, the MVP, you want that out there as soon as you can and develop, having got it out there and received income for your product. That then funds the next round of development.
Yeah, so one of the sayings that we have is good enough is good enough. So particularly with some silos of clients we work with, for example, academics, they try and make perfection, and you will never, ever get perfection. And there's a trade-off between MVP and perfection and commercial viability. And it's trying to understand at what point do you launch the product. Yes. So I completely agree. I think if you've got a strategy behind it, that's the most important thing.
And that can be fundable, that strategy. So it'd be interesting to get your views on if you prepare a strategy which says, I will get out the MVP, but then we will work towards. I mean, that is an investable plan, is it not?
Yeah. So I'll throw another thing in here. Technology readiness levels, TRL. So technology readiness levels were developed by NASA in the 50s, I believe, which is a metric from 0 to 9 or 0 to 10, depends which one you adopt. And 0 is a blue sky idea and 10 is ready for launch. And what organizations need to think about is key milestones. So one key milestone with a company of any size is to think about proof of concept. So proof of concept is usually TRL 3, which demonstrates a good enough is good enough product where you can actually show it to your intended user and gain feedback. That's your first milestone. But in terms of MVP, it can be launching the product in its basic form, generating income, as you said, and then building on that platform. It depends what the product is. You know, you couldn't launch a medical device that's an MVP because naturally the market will want to have something which is a bit more complex. So it's kind of a case by case. And I think, you know, with our knowledge and experience, it's understanding who the client is, who the market is, and what the project is in terms of when good enough is actually good enough and when perfection is probably needed.
Yeah, I mean, it is an important lesson, isn't it, for business, just to make sure that they know where they are in that cycle of innovation, to ensure that they're doing the right things at the right time, that they're not trying to endlessly develop academically and by research their product. They can put it out earlier than that, all else being equal.
Yeah, and I think another aspect to this is leadership. I've got an MSc in leadership as well as being a trained designer. And anybody, I said it earlier, anybody can innovate, but actually to commercialize innovation requires good leadership. And there are many facets and assets of leadership. And you know, you could argue that there are cases where you have a really good innovation, but through bad leadership, it's made the wrong steps and never got to be commercialized. So I think that people need to understand that I believe that leadership and navigating innovation are interdependent. You know, if it's badly managed or badly led, you know, there's a good chance it won't be successful, which is a shame, you know, because there are lots of ideas out there that, you know, didn't quite make it because they've not understood the rules of good leadership.
That is important, isn't it? And can you give, without giving names away, of course, could you give sort of some examples of where you've seen perhaps leadership be less than what it should be, and that has in fact impacted on the development of a product into the market?
Yeah, I think it's down to the people. So I'm not going to specifically point at silos of companies, but with a startup company, they know their technology, and the right startup company is agile, motivated, and willing to listen. So it's no surprise that, you know, high growth, that founders of high growth startups really accelerate and get it to market and make lots of money because of their personalities and characteristics. Whereas large organizations are, I'm going to use the word sluggish, but I don't mean that to be kind of in the wrong way. You know, when you have tiers of management of a large of a large organisation, it's like steering a ship. You turn the rudder, and 20 miles later, it actually starts to move.
Yeah.
And I think it's really down to the strength of the CEO, the person at the top, in terms of driving it forward. And I think what happens is kind of culture can get in the way as well. So I think there are lots of reasons why, there is good leadership and bad leadership. But, certainly, we've all seen the high growth startups that kind of make it because they just cut through. Yeah. There's no politics. They're agile and they just get stuff done.
And there's a couple of words you mentioned there, listening. So as a startup, you can't do it all yourself. You're going to need advisors around you, paid or unpaid, but different skill sets to make this happen. And I think also you mentioned there under leadership, enabling. So you need to allow others to make decisions if you don't want to get bogged down and in areas where they can make decisions.
Yeah. So and I gave some talks about this and some slides. And the best way I can describe it is with a company that is going places. And as the company grows larger, the person who started it will need to take their hands off the steering wheel at some stage and allow advisors or consultants or other stakeholders to do things because they can probably do it better. And the best way to describe that is almost like being in a self-driving car, a Tesla at 70 miles an hour on the motorway and literally taking your hands off the steering wheel. It's going to still drive, but it's a very peculiar feeling allowing somebody else to take the steering wheel. And that is, on my MSc, it's one thing I've done a lot of research on in terms of how startups can be compromised because that founder won't take their hands off the steering wheel. A bit of a sidetrack, my thesis was on founder to leader, and it was looking at the characteristics of a founder in terms of, their assets, and then looking at the characteristics of a leader or a CEO, which are completely different. You're leading companies, you're managing teams, and you've got a lot more responsibility. And I was kind of interested to understand the same person who was a founder and also the leader, at what point did they feel they transitioned from being a founder to actually being a leader? And it's kind of, and that is one aspect that can fail, where they just can't relinquish that control and letting other people take on some reins and empowerment and delegation. Yeah.
I mean that I'd be interested to hear what you think are the conflicts between leadership and founder. And I appreciate we're talking generalities here rather than, there are always individuals, we could probably name them, who are the exception to the rule. But what are some of the sort of conflicts and contradictions that you see between a leader on the one hand and a founder on the other?
Founders are traditionally, they've probably got some experience in industry, and they've identified a silo, something that they can specifically go deep into to make money. So they're very knowledge-based, traditional people that can make it. The personalities are very motivated and kind of single-minded. So it's kind of a contradiction when that same person needs to learn and upskill leadership, which means that you need a completely different skill set of storytelling is one aspect. So bringing the people on the journey with you, fostering a culture. So as a founder of a business, you have your own culture. And it's interesting how those cultures are manifested as a company gets larger and how you lead others. There's a really interesting thing on YouTube, I can't remember the name of it, where it's all about leadership. And there is one chap on a beach somewhere and he's kind of doing these crazy dance moves. And everybody's looking at him and nobody is joining in at all. But eventually he gets one follower who joins him and then they carry on doing this crazy dance. And if you fast forward over minutes or I can't remember, 10 minutes, literally the whole of the beach is doing this crazy dance move. And it just shows if you persevere and you have your first follower that you can lead. And I think a lot of people have problems with that delegation and empowerment. And it's kind of breaking through that cycle. Leading is a completely different ballgame. You need to be a kind of a lot more skill set. The interesting thing is, for my thesis, those people that founded and led, they were continually developing, their skill sets, peer-to-peer networking, doing master's degrees, that kind of stuff, to continually learn. Because there is a point that founder needs to talk the language of business in terms of finance and hold their own. So it's kind of I find it fascinating, the whole thing about leadership and how it intertwines with innovation.
Yes, and those founders that don't learn those skills, they believe that they are leaders, but you and I see fundamental flaws in how they run those companies.
Yeah.
The loss of value in those companies just because they don't see that they don't have the skills.
Yeah.
That is interesting. Let me take you back. You referenced it a little earlier, and I think this is important to the advice that you give, but you referenced that you set up yourself a number of years ago. Can we just go back a little bit in time to that? First of all, I'm interested just to know why you decided to set up. What was the rationale behind that?
Okay.
So let's start with that.
Sure. Well, I'll kind of start from the start. So I left school at 16. I enjoyed design and technology at school, and very much vocational, and didn't think I was clever enough to do A-levels. So I applied for apprenticeship at Rolls-Royce Aero. I think there were 720 applications and 72 got through. So that was a really good moment for me, that actually this is an apprenticeship back in 1986, if people can remember that long ago. So Earn As You Learn, a youth training scheme. And then I've spent 4 years at Rolls-Royce as an apprentice, learning the craft of manufacturing in a high precision environment, and finished as a qualified draftsman. Did night class 2 days a week and one day a week. Then spent many years in industry working in design and manufacturing. And then in the early noughties, I was operations director, and we'd hired in some design consultancies. And I was astonished about how they were very good at doing the front end stuff, the shiny things, but didn't understand the principles of manufacturing. So the back end, the wheels would literally fall off on projects. And I was like, I wonder if there's a consultancy out there that can do the front end stuff, the nice shiny design stuff, but also take it through in terms of manufacture. And there wasn't any. So that was a catalyst for me in 2005 to set up PDM, which is product design and manufacture. When I think back, I've had one child and one soon to be born. Think about it now, I was incredibly naive, but I was highly motivated. I've always been, very, very highly motivated with what I do, and got 3 projects in the first 2 weeks. Started with no overdraft or loan or anything, literally zero. Started out in a Harrogate business centre. I remember going to IKEA to buy a plant and a laptop, and hired a room. I remember walking in the room, probably the smallest room that I could hire, closing the door, putting my laptop and plant on the table, and thinking, oh my goodness, my whole future career and the income to my family is dependent on me. And it was very cathartic, very scary. But when you have you believe you've got a niche and you've got a silo and you've got something that you can offer, you just kind of go for it. And we're still organically grown. Anybody that starts a company, full credit to them. I think a lot of people that go out there and go, I wish I'd have done this or I wish I'd have done that. You know what? If you have a crack at it, then you'll know for sure. So I know how tough it is to start a business. So I'm very empathetic when we work with high growth startups of how hard it is. And I think that this is where the support's needed. I think when you're in business, it's not really about that transactional thing. It's about being a person that you can impart that knowledge to various people in that kind of ecosystem and help them along the way. Because I believe that what goes around comes around. So, and I've certainly had a lot of help over the years with various people. So too many to name on this.
Yeah, of course.
Anybody that does an apprenticeship, apprenticeship's got a bit of a battering in the 90s, very much devalued. But anybody that does an apprenticeship now, I firmly endorse it, because you can earn as you learn, work on the job. And I think apprenticeships now are incredibly popular, and perhaps a good alternative to a degree, depending on what the actual career path that you want to go and do. From when I started a business, I always thought that business was transactional, actually, and you had to wear a suit and you had to portray yourself in a certain way. But I rapidly learned that a lot of it's about relationships. And I don't play golf, but you hear things like businesses done on the golf course. And I didn't quite understand what that meant, but I do now. I think for us, when we work with clients, a lot of it is relationship driven, and understanding the needs of the founder or the CEO of an organization, what they need from us, and how we can help them, and more importantly, if we can help them. If we can't help them, we'll say. But I think that business is a very small community, and there's lots of really good people out there that can help in terms of kind of informal mentoring. So, yeah, I think a lot of it is about relationships and knowing people and giving a hand.
And asking for help as well, I think.
I think asking for help is a lot easier now than what it used to be. I think that business has totally changed now over the last kind of 10 years. I mean, when I started out, it was very, as I say, business orientated, whereas now, I have clients WhatsApping me, and it's totally normal. And it's interesting how business and my life are intertwined. There's lots of talk about work-life balance, but for me, my work is my life, my life is my work. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think for me, to enjoy working with a client, in terms of projects, but also enjoying the success is really important. And I think a lot of that is having the right DNA, that my company has got the same ethos and values as the companies that we work with and collaborate with. That's really, really important, particularly with innovation, because R&D and innovation it's high risk. Things go wrong. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So for us, it's having that trust when we work with a client that, this might not work, this proof of concept might not work, but we have a plan of how we would migrate around it. And I think a lot of it is that's the fundamentals is having good people that you work with.
Yeah. And that comes back to the integrity point, doesn't it? That even though you sometimes have to deliver bad news, not always, of course, but if people then trust you when you say the good stuff as well as the bad stuff. So that is important, and it comes back to people and relationships at that point. Do I trust this person to give me the right advice?
Yeah, and I think for us, almost 20 years in, we've got the credentials, the networks, the projects, the case studies, the credibility. I think the best way to describe innovation is that we're almost like Sherpas. If you imagine Everest, we're at base camp with a client, and we can take them the hard way. We can take them the very risky way to get to the top. We'll get there quicker, but there's a lot more risk, a lot more pain, and perhaps a lot more cost. Or we can take them the easier way, which will take them longer. And it's really down to the clients, enabling the client to make their own decision in terms of which way they want to go. Yeah. And if it's risky, then they will understand that, because I'll be navigating them through that kind of crevice, for example. And I think a lot of it is, how risk averse that particular client is, because there might be a lot at stake for this thing. Particularly within health technologies, you have literally one chance to get it right. Yeah. So it's important to make sure that we make the right steps.
Let me just ask you a more direct question. If you had one piece of advice to give to a MedTech company with an innovation, perhaps a startup company, perhaps just a new innovation, what, from your experience, would be your advice to them?
Get the right team around you.
Right.
100%. I know that you guys work with startups. From a legal perspective, is getting those kind of frameworks in place from the outset, so that, and they probably might see the value initially, but they will see the value as they scale. Yeah. So it's getting the right people, and getting the right people is expensive. Yeah. But you literally get one chance to get it right. Not just necessarily health tech, but in lots of industries. So by some means, get the right people on board, whether it's pro bono or equity or whatever it is, or funding for that person, because they will give you the right advice at the right time. And even now, I firmly believe in mentoring. I kind of mentor companies, but at PDM we've got a non-exec chairman, and I think lots and lots of experience, and having that kind of shoulder to lean on is really important. So fundamentally get the right people, and everything else will fall into place.
Because people know people as well who can help, so it widens the circle, doesn't it? Richard, that's really helpful. Let me just ask you about MedTech at the moment. It's obviously a regulated area. What do you see as its challenges at the moment? Where do you see it now, and where do you see it going, either in the short or the longer term in the UK?
Yeah, so I'll give you some context. So MedTech or health tech is it's a fascinating industry. I absolutely love working in it because we work on some amazing projects with some amazing clients. It gets hit by things like recessions, as everybody does. It got hit by COVID quite hard. Brexit was another hit. All those things were kind of transient. In health tech at the moment, it's really to do with sustainability. So health tech is there's quite a lot of, it's quite a carbon intense industry because things like single-use disposable medical devices, which are obviously single-use disposable for a reason in terms of cross-contamination. So at the same time, we do need to address these issues. So the NHS has been leading the way by creating its 2045 roadmap of how the NHS and its supporting suppliers will address Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3. So Scope 1 and 2 is infrastructure and Scope 3 is products. And it's really looking at how the whole ecosystem can navigate around decarbonising the industry, which is incredibly difficult. That's one big thing that we are wrestling with at the moment. I think there's a notion that, moving from single-use disposable to reusable is an obvious step, but actually it's a lot more complex than that. So we've been involved in the Department of Health and Social Care Design for Life programme. So Rich Shaw at PDM has been involved with that and trying to understand what this actually means in terms of navigating companies through the sustainability issues. It's a complex debate which is unravelling all of the time. And it isn't transient like COVID or Brexit. It's here to stay. And it's something that there's a lot more upswell. We've been involved in this for several years, working with clients on this, and we've invested heavily over the last 3 years to actually be at the forefront of helping through leadership with our companies and our clients and what it actually means. So the NHS created a mandate of what needs to happen, and we are helping clients with how they actually do it. So that's probably the big one, is health tech and sustainability.
Interesting. Can I just ask on that? And it's a question I think you'll have heard, I certainly have, from health tech, med tech clients. It's, do I go for the NHS or do I try a different market first? Can you just give me your thoughts on that? And just so everybody knows, it is felt that it is hard to quickly get into the NHS and its 32 trusts.
Yeah, the reason why I'm kind of smiling is I have this conversation almost every day. I had one this morning, actually. So the NHS is a fantastic organisation. It's a hotbed of innovation and new ideas. The challenge of the NHS is that it is fragmented. There are lots of trusts, and almost every trust it is an organisation within itself. And you would imagine that to break innovations into the NHS, that there would be, a rapid adoption, but it's far more complex than that. So we have organisations, for example, the Health Innovation Network, who were formerly the Academic Health Science Network, who are tasked by the NHS to bring innovations into their pipeline. The research arm of the NHS, the National Institute of Health Research, they're also tasked with evaluating innovation. So my company PDM is the official partner to the NAHR for innovation and sustainability. So there's no issues in terms of demand signalling of organisations to help get it onto the radar. But the reality is that because of procurement systems and the length of time that it takes to evaluate innovations, that this is why people get switched off by it. The reality is that it's kind of what I mentioned earlier about the large vessel. The NHS is probably a good example where you've got a very large vessel. You turn the tiller and 20 miles later it starts to turn. It's also to do with people as well. So it's an incredibly difficult system to navigate. And as a result of that, a lot of companies turn to the US to launch their products initially for clinical evaluation to demonstrate the efficacy, and then they kind of reverse back into the NHS once they've got some traction. It's notoriously difficult just because of many, many reasons. But, I think that if you think you've got an innovation, no matter how great it is, it's incredibly difficult to get it onto their horizon, because the reality is that there is maybe not as good an innovation, but something that's maybe aligned with that's already in procurement and is secured for 3 years' time. It should be better than that, but it's so difficult.
And I imagine one of the advantages of coming to PDM is that you would put that into the strategic thinking, the time it takes to get into the NHS. And that would be part of the cost, I suppose, that the company needs to accept that it will have to bear until it can get in there.
Yeah, it's not just the product itself, it's how that product has an impact on the care pathway.
Yes.
So, we do our insight with NHS is through the NAHR and the HINs. It's conversation pieces. They literally do not open the door, but they will give you guidance in terms of how you need to do it. For us, our insight is working with clinicians within the NHS where they can evaluate an early stage innovation and give some feedback. I think for us, the approach for us and how we impart it with clients is to think about a snowball. Don't think about an innovation and how to get that into the NHS. Think about how you start with a seed of an idea, maybe a proof of concept, gather some key opinion leaders, get some efficacy, then go for maybe an early stage grant, maybe a proof of concept grant, gain some more data, and let it build and build and build and build. And then you have a portfolio of data and evidence that you can then have those conversations. But, it kind of takes years, but a lot of it is about relationships. But even then it's quite difficult because the NHS is under so much pressure that it's being pushed and pulled all over the place. So at the moment, companies do go to the US because it's just far easier. But that's just the way it is at the moment.
And are you, Richard, and PDM generally happy just to have a conversation with somebody who thinks they have an idea, just to have that initial chat about what some of the hurdles might be?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I have chats probably every week
Yeah.
with either a clinician or an innovator or a high-growth startup or a large manufacturer or a global health tech. And the conversations are broadly the same. It will start going back to the start of this conversation. Have you spoken to the user? Have you made a proof of concept? Where's the IP? All those kind of things. The theme is always the same. But I'm happy to talk to many people because I think it's having that kind of confidence building at the start. And I am very, very happy to signpost, potential clients of people they might need to talk to before they come back to us. Because as I said before, I believe that what goes around comes around. And health tech is such a small niche community that kind of everybody knows everybody, and it's all about helping each other out.
Yeah. And on that note, Richard, thank you very much indeed for your time today. Thank you.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, share and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.